Have you ever walked into a room full of people and felt like you didn't exist at all? Like your body was there, but your presence wasn't registered. Like you were invisible in plain sight. You sit quietly. You listen carefully. You know you have competence, experience, ideas that could move things forward. Yet no one asks what you think. No one turns their head toward you when real decisions are made. And the silence around you feels heavier than rejection. Meanwhile, there are others in that same room who speak less than you, contribute less than you, sometimes even know less than you. Yet the attention bends toward them naturally, as if gravity itself chose them, and you leave wondering what secret you somehow missed. You've probably tried to fix this the right way by working harder, staying later, being more reliable, more polite, more agreeable, more honest, believing that eventually effort would be noticed and goodness would be rewarded. But instead of recognition, you slowly realized something unsettling. The more you tried, the smaller your presence became. This is the quiet wound of adulthood that no one talks about. The feeling of knowing deep down that you have value while watching the world treat you as if you don't. And the most painful part isn't the lack of success. It's the confusion, the sense that the rules everyone else is playing by were never explained to you. Here is the truth that feels uncomfortable precisely because it is true. The world does not move according to fairness, and it does not reward intention, effort, or morality by default. It moves according to power and perception. People don't respond to who you are inside. They respond to what they sense from you in the moment. If you don't understand how power actually works, how influence is felt rather than declared, you can be talented, ethical, and hardworking and still remain on the outside, watching others pass you by. This isn't because you are lacking, and it isn't because you failed. It's because you were taught to believe that value speaks for itself, when in reality, value must be positioned. As Machiavelli implied centuries ago, those who ignore how power operates don't stay pure, they stay powerless. And the first step out of invisibility is not becoming louder or nicer, but seeing the game for what it truly is. More than 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli wrote The Prince, not to teach people how to become cruel or immoral, but to say out loud what most societies prefer to whisper or deny. Human beings do not move through the world guided by virtue alone. They move through it driven by self-interest, fear, status, and ego. Machiavelli was not interested in imagining how people should behave in a perfect world. He was focused on describing how people actually behave when power, survival, and ambition are at stake. That is why his work has survived centuries of criticism, censorship, and misunderstanding. Because even today, those same patterns repeat themselves everywhere you look. In corporate boardrooms, in politics, in networking events, and in every environment where influence quietly decides outcomes. This video is not here to turn you into a manipulator or to strip you of empathy. And it is not an invitation to become cold, cynical, or ruthless for the sake of it. The real purpose is far more practical and far more honest. To help you stop being naive about how the world works. To stop walking into powerful rooms with the unconscious posture of someone asking for permission to belong. And to show you how to connect with influential people without betraying your values or losing yourself in the process. The 13 laws you are about to hear are not surface-level tips or trendy networking hacks. They are psychological principles rooted in human nature. You don't need to apply all of them, and you don't need to like all of them, but you do need to understand them. Because ignorance of power doesn't make you moral, it makes you vulnerable. And once you see these patterns clearly, You can choose consciously instead of being pushed by forces you never understood. Rule 1. Never outshine the person above you. Because the biggest mistake people make when they come face to face with power is trying too hard to impress. Believing that intelligence, competence, and visibility will automatically earn respect. So they list achievements, display knowledge, and fill the space with words, unaware that inside the mind of a powerful person, a very different calculation is taking place. The real question is not, is this person capable? But, is this person a threat to my position? A veteran CEO once said something brutally honest. He doesn't fire incompetent people. He fires people who make him feel unsafe. And that single sentence explains why so many talented individuals quietly disappear from important rooms. Imagine noticing a flaw in your boss's plan and offering a better idea during a meeting. The room goes silent. No one reacts. And a week later, you're removed from the project. Not because you were wrong, but because you shined at the wrong moment. Power doesn't resent talent. It resents comparison. And when you make someone above you look smaller, even unintentionally, you trigger their instinct to protect themselves. The strategy is not to dim your intelligence, but to redirect it, allowing the person above you to remain the brightest presence, while your influence grows quietly beneath the surface. Frame your ideas as extensions of their thinking. Ask questions that lead them to conclusions you already see, and let them take the credit while you secure the position. In the world of power, you don't need the spotlight. You need placement, because visibility without position is a liability, not an advantage. Rule 2. Conceal your true intentions. Because the moment people know exactly what you want, they gain leverage over you. If they sense that you want a promotion, they will keep you hopeful but waiting. If they sense that you want money, they will delay and negotiate you down. If they sense that you crave recognition, they will feed you cheap praise and keep you compliant. Weak people wear their desires on their faces, while strong people carry them quietly in their minds. Consider a simple example. Two individuals meet the same investor on the same day. The first says openly, "I need funding," and spends the conversation explaining why he deserves it. The second talks calmly about the market, the shifts that are happening, the mistakes most companies are making, and the opportunities no one seems to notice. When the meetings end, the follow-up call goes to the second person, not because he asked for money, but because he never revealed that he needed it. Mystery created value, while hunger destroyed leverage. The application is simple but uncomfortable. Enter conversations as if you are already standing on solid ground. Focus on ideas, people, patterns, and context rather than your personal needs. Allow the other person to wonder why you are really there, and let them project importance onto you instead of you asking for it. In the world of power, those who explain their desire lose control of the frame, while those who control their desire quietly control the direction of the game. Rule 3. Never beg for attention or approval. Make yourself necessary, because no one in a position of power is moved by pity for very long. You can explain your struggles, share how hard things have been, talk about the pressure you're under, and people may listen politely, nod with empathy, and then forget the conversation the moment they walk away. Power doesn't reward suffering. It rewards usefulness. Consider a simple but telling example. An employee wants mentorship from a senior leader. He could ask for advice, explain that he's stuck, and hope for generosity. Or he could approach the same person and say, "I noticed our team is losing X amount every month, and I tested a solution that might stop it." The reaction is immediate. because the second approach doesn't ask for time, it offers relief. This is the core misunderstanding most people have about influence. They believe being liked creates opportunity, when in reality being needed creates protection. Power does not respond to emotion, fairness, or personal stories. It responds to interest, leverage, and problem solving. If you want access to influential people, stop leading with what you want and start studying what they fear, what they are losing, and what tasks drain their energy every day. Then position yourself as the answer to that specific pain. When you solve a problem they cannot ignore, you are no longer someone asking for a chance. You are someone they cannot afford to overlook. This is not about manipulation or losing your integrity. It is about understanding the language power speaks fluently. In environments where decisions matter, sympathy fades quickly, but necessity lingers because people forget who they liked. Yet they remember who made their life easier. And that is why being loved is fragile, but being needed makes you hard to replace. Rule 4. Master the art of disappearing at the right moment, because constant availability quietly destroys your value. When you always reply immediately, always say yes, always show up on demand, you may believe you're proving commitment. But what you're really signaling is that your time is inexpensive. In environments shaped by power, importance is measured by scarcity, not enthusiasm. Think about a skilled consultant who never has an open slot right away, not because he's overwhelmed, but because his value requires delay. People don't question it, they respect it. The same rule applies to you. When you are endlessly accessible, your presence becomes predictable. And predictable things are easy to overlook. Power respects time because time is the only resource that cannot be replaced. And when you give yours away freely, you teach others to treat it casually. The solution is not arrogance or distance for its own sake, but structure. Build a schedule that reflects priorities beyond pleasing others. Stop orbiting around someone else's availability and learn to show up fully when you are present. Then step back without apology. When your presence feels intentional instead of automatic, it carries weight. Absence creates space, and space creates curiosity. People begin to notice when you're not there, and that absence starts working on your behalf in ways constant visibility never could. In the language of power, showing up less but meaning more shifts how you are perceived. Because being everywhere makes you common. But knowing when to withdraw quietly turns your presence into something that feels earned rather than expected. Rule 5. Become the mirror. Because everyone is deeply in love with their own reflection, even those who appear humble on the surface. Powerful people are not looking for debates or intellectual sparring. They are looking for confirmation that their way of seeing the world makes sense. When you challenge their worldview too early, you create resistance. But when you reflect it back with clarity, you create trust. Picture a simple interaction. You're speaking with a leader who frames everything in the language of war, winning, losing, strategy, and dominance. If you respond using emotion, personal stories, or abstract ideals, the connection feels off, like two radios on different frequencies. The moment you speak in strategic terms, referencing positioning, timing, and advantage, the bond forms instantly, not because you agreed with everything they said, but because you spoke in a language their mind already understands. Human beings trust those who feel familiar. This is why mirroring works when it's done subtly. Pay attention to their speaking rhythm, the words they repeat, and the mental models they use to explain the world. Then reflect those patterns back without exaggeration. This is not shallow imitation, it is psychological alignment. When people hear their own thoughts echoed back in a clearer form, their subconscious labels you as safe, intelligent, and aligned. They don't feel challenged, they feel understood. And understanding is addictive to power, because power is often isolated. When someone looks at you and sees themselves, trust forms without effort, and in the dynamics of influence. That moment of recognition matters more than trying to prove you are right. Rule 6. Become the carrier of information. Because in the modern world, the right information delivered at the right moment is a form of power. People at the top often live inside carefully constructed bubbles, surrounded by agreement, filtered feedback, and polite silence, which means they are usually starved for truth, even while appearing confident. This is where most people fail, because they confuse gossip with value, repeating rumors, opinions, and noise that add nothing and quietly damage trust. What actually elevates you is insight, not chatter. Insight is information that helps someone see risk before it arrives, opportunity before it becomes obvious, or reality before it turns costly. When you bring that kind of clarity, you stop being an outsider and start becoming useful. Power protects those who protect it, and the person who brings unfiltered truth becomes someone worth keeping close. The key, however, is restraint. Never reveal all your sources, and never deliver everything at once. If your information can be accessed without you, your value collapses. Control the flow, curate what matters, and deliver only what strengthens the person you're speaking to. This is not about manipulation. It's about positioning yourself as a reliable signal in a world full of noise. When someone knows that important truths reach them through you first, your presence becomes associated with awareness and advantage. In environments where decisions carry weight, people remember who warned them, who informed them, and who helped them see clearly before others did. Because the one who controls the stream of information quietly controls their place within the hierarchy. Rule 7. A shared enemy creates an alliance faster than shared interests ever could. Because nothing bonds people more quickly than the feeling of us versus that. When two individuals recognize the same problem, the same inefficiency, or the same form of mediocrity and feel frustrated by it in the same way, an immediate sense of alignment forms. This doesn't require personal history or deep trust. It requires recognition. Think about moments when you and someone else both expressed quiet contempt for a broken system, a culture that rewards incompetence, or standards that have fallen too low. In that instant, a subtle bond appears, because you are no longer two separate people, you are part of the same side. This works because shared opposition creates shared identity. However, there is an important distinction that separates influence from toxicity. The goal is not to complain or to be endlessly negative, because negativity without purpose weakens your position. The bond must be built around righteous resistance, not bitterness. You are not attacking people. You are rejecting dysfunction. When done correctly, this frames both of you as sane actors in an irrational environment, as builders trapped in a world of shortcuts and noise. That dynamic forges loyalty faster than praise or agreement ever will. People don't trust you because you like the same things they like. They trust you because you recognize the same threats they recognize. In the psychology of power, naming the enemy clarifies the mission. And once someone believes you are fighting the same battle, they stop seeing you as an outsider and start seeing you as an ally. Because we rarely remember who admired us, but we always remember who stood beside us against what we despised. Rule 8. Play to their dream. Because everyone lives inside a story about who they are and who they are meant to be. A CEO doesn't see himself as ruthless. He sees himself as the one holding everything together. An artist doesn't see chaos. She sees misunderstood genius. People with power rarely experience reality directly because money, status, and authority insulate them from friction. So their self-image becomes something they fiercely protect. The mistake most people make is trying to correct that story, pointing out contradictions, flaws, or inconvenient truths too early. That doesn't create respect. It creates resistance. Influence grows when you step into their narrative instead of trying to rewrite it. This doesn't mean you lie or flatter blindly. It means you understand the role they want to play and position yourself as a supporting character that strengthens that identity. When someone wants to be seen as a mentor, you become the student who listens. When someone wants to be the visionary, you become the operator who executes. When someone wants to be the rebel, you become the ally who understands the fight. Do not force them to confront reality head-on. Reality is uncomfortable, and powerful people pay a premium to avoid it. If you are the one person who helps their story hold together, you become emotionally protected. In the theater of power, perception matters more than correction, and loyalty often forms around illusion rather than truth. You don't need to be the hero of the story, because heroes are replaceable. But the character who keeps the story believable is not. When you allow someone to see their ideal self reflected and reinforced through you, your position becomes difficult to remove, because losing you would mean cracking the dream they are living inside. Rule 9. Become the calm they need, because people in positions of power are constantly exhausted by pressure, noise, and responsibility. They carry decisions that affect employees, money, reputation, and survival. And most people who approach them only add weight to that burden by bringing more problems, more urgency, and more emotion. What powerful individuals quietly crave is not excitement or drama, but relief. This is why a simple phrase like, "it's handled," can be worth more than 10 polished slides or long explanations. Those words signal safety, control, and resolution. When someone comes to you in a state of urgency or frustration, and you respond with steadiness, clarity, and solutions, you immediately differentiate yourself. Power retains those who make its life easier. This doesn't require you to suppress emotion or pretend everything is fine. It requires emotional discipline. When they are rushed, you slow down. When they are reactive, you remain grounded. You absorb chaos and return structure. Over time, your presence becomes associated with stability rather than stress. In high-stakes environments, people don't remember who spoke the most or sounded the smartest. They remember who reduced friction and prevented problems from escalating. This is how trust compounds quietly. When you consistently lower someone's mental load, meetings with you feel like relief instead of obligation. In the economy of power, calm is currency. The person who can regulate the emotional temperature of the room gains influence without demanding it. Because reducing stress for someone above you doesn't just earn appreciation, it raises your value, making you someone they don't want to operate without. Rule 10. Never fix your identity, because rigidity makes you easy to break. Many people cling tightly to who they think they are, the leader, the rebel, the expert, the loyal soldier. And when reality doesn't match that identity, conflict appears. Power doesn't reward consistency of ego. It rewards adaptability. There will be moments when leading is required, and moments when following quietly gives you more leverage. If you insist on always being in charge, you create resistance. If you insist on always submitting, you erase yourself. Influence grows when you can move between roles without emotional attachment. Think of water. It doesn't argue with the shape of the container, yet it fills every space and eventually wears down stone. This is the strength of formlessness. When you approach powerful people with a rigid sense of self, you force them to adjust to you, which creates friction. When you remain flexible, you remove obstacles. You can be assertive one day and receptive the next, visible when needed and invisible when useful. This is not deception. It is strategic maturity. The most resilient individuals are not those with the strongest personalities, but those who can read the environment and adjust without losing their core values. In the dynamics of power, identity is a tool, not a prison. When you have no fixed shape, you become difficult to attack, difficult to categorize, and difficult to eliminate. Because what cannot be pinned down cannot be struck directly, and what adapts survives where rigid strength fails. Rule 11. Create dependence. Because if you can be replaced easily, you are always at risk. Many people misunderstand networking and influence, believing that independence makes them powerful, when in reality, power is built through strategic entanglement. Think about what happens when someone leaves an organization and nothing changes. Their role was optional. Now contrast that with someone who holds critical relationships, understands a process no one else fully grasps, or manages a key system that quietly keeps everything running. That person isn't protected by titles or goodwill, but by necessity. This doesn't mean hoarding information out of insecurity. It means taking ownership of things that matter. Be the bridge between important people. Be the one who understands how the system actually works, not how it's described on paper. When you become the keeper of continuity, removing you creates disruption, and power avoids disruption whenever possible. The principle is simple. No one discards what they rely on. True influence grows when your absence would create friction, delays, or loss. This is why independence in professional environments is often an illusion. We are all connected through dependencies. The only question is whether those dependencies work for or against you. By embedding yourself into relationships, workflows, and outcomes, you shift from being a resource to being infrastructure. And infrastructure is not evaluated every day. It is assumed, protected, and maintained. In the world of power, value is not measured by how free you are, but by how deeply you are integrated. Because what is deeply integrated cannot be removed without consequence. And that consequence is the quiet leverage that keeps you safe. Rule 12. Control the options, because the person who frames the choices quietly controls the outcome. When you ask an open question like, "What do you want to do?" you hand over both direction and authority, creating confusion rather than leadership. Powerful people face decision fatigue every day, and too many options feel like noise, not freedom. Influence comes from structure. Instead of asking, present 2 or 3 carefully designed paths and explain the trade-offs clearly. In that moment, you are no longer seeking instruction. You are providing orientation. This is why the person who writes the menu controls the meal, even though the guest believes they are choosing. The decision feels autonomous, but the frame has already shaped the result. This approach respects power rather than challenges it. You allow the other person to feel in control while you guide the direction beneath the surface. It's not manipulation. It's competence. People trust those who reduce complexity. When someone consistently organizes chaos into clear, actionable choices, they become associated with clarity and foresight. Over time, this shifts perception. You are no longer someone who executes tasks, but someone who thinks ahead. In the psychology of power, the final decision matters less than the structure that produced it. Those who control the frame influence behavior without issuing commands, because authority flows naturally toward whoever makes decisions easier, not harder. When you master the art of presenting options instead of questions, you move from reacting to shaping, and shaping is where real leverage lives. Rule 13. Do not need them, because the final paradox of power is that the more you depend on it, the less access you have to it. When you walk into a room needing approval, opportunity, or validation, that hunger leaks through your posture, your tone, and your timing. You speak a little faster, your voice lifts slightly, your eyes search for reassurance, and powerful people sense it immediately. Neediness signals imbalance. But when you are solid on your own, something shifts. Your voice drops. Your eye contact holds. Your presence slows the room instead of chasing it. This is not confidence you perform. It is stability you embody. Power recognizes power, and it is drawn to those who can walk away without resentment or fear. This is why the person willing to leave the table often holds more leverage than the person desperate to stay. Radical autonomy does not mean isolation. It means self-sufficiency of identity. You have your own standards, your own direction, your own sense of worth that does not rise or fall with someone else's approval. When you connect from that place, the dynamic changes. You are no longer asking to be chosen. You are offering alignment. Powerful people are often surrounded by people who bend, agree, and adjust themselves endlessly. That flexibility may look useful, but it creates emptiness. When someone meets a person who is grounded, respectful yet not dependent, it feels rare. It feels real. And that rarity creates fascination. In the end, connecting with power is not about chasing influence, mastering techniques, or memorizing rules. It is about becoming someone who does not need to grasp. You don't walk into the room asking for a seat. You walk in because you already have one within yourself. And from that inner position, every external door opens differently.